Morning, everybody. Based on your questions and observations, we're going to have at least two, maybe three videos this morning. Great questions, great observations. Thank you. Keep them coming. So, the first issue I want to address is this issue of conditions, different disease categories within the DSM overlapping. You're absolutely correct. There's a lot when you look at something like our personality disorders. Again, you start with that general description that applies to every character or personality disorder, and then you start getting into the more specific um, categories with those diagnostic criteria. When you are creating either a clinical impression or a diagnosis, yes, you're starting at with looking at the clinical criteria. And from there, you then begin to also look at what is the true impact, what's the full impact of whatever behaviors, whatever thought patterns the client is presenting, how is that impacting their life and their functioning within life. And when you start to look at both of those, the very, very objective and then the a bit more subjective category where you're using your best clinical judgment, that's where you start to get um, kind of the final call, if you will. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of similarities between somebody who's narcissistic and somebody who's borderline. And so that's where you're looking at not only the check on the diagnostic criteria, but where this person falls in terms of a continuum of functionality. Here's the reality. If you look at borderline personality disorder, um, just about every one of us at some point in our life probably met that objective criteria as a borderline personality. Does that mean we are? No, because when you look at the functionality of people who may have presented some or many of those behaviors or thought patterns, when you look at the overall functionality, they're doing okay. Other people who present those same behaviors or thought patterns are not necessarily doing as well. Hope that helps. If not, let me know and we'll try it again. The next question that came up was about the difference between juvenile and adult diagnosis, if you will. There certainly are certain diagnostic criteria, and if you would look in the DSM as a whole, there are certain categories that will specifically say under age of or over age of. Again, some of this I think you have to look at in terms of your best clinical judgment. If you look at the diagnostic criteria for um, bipolar disorder, which is a mood disorder, um, I think every adolescent out there on many, many days would meet that criteria. The mood swings, et cetera, et cetera. So do the parents of the adolescents many days as well. But does that mean they have bipolar disorder? No. Um, it means that they are a normally developing adolescent. That is one thing that I really like about the DSM-5. Prior to the DSM-5, uh, you were able to diagnose very young children with bipolar disorder based on a mood swing, instability of emotional footing, which really is just developmental for normal children and adolescents. But these young people were getting diagnosed and slapped on some pretty powerful psychotropics because it made everybody's life easier because then they just kind of sat and did the DSM-5 has cleared up a lot of that, and it's interesting because when I trained on, this is a long time ago, the DSM, the original. There were a lot of things wrong with that manual, we know now today, but it very specifically said that no one could be diagnosed with bipolar under the age of 21. A lot of the psychiatrists that I worked with wouldn't even consider it for people under the age of 25. So there definitely can be and are some very distinct categories for juveniles and adults. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video now before we move on to our next category, which is schizophrenia.